and you're watching Interface here on SABC3. My name is Thembi Samakhele. This week we celebrate International Women's Day. This comes at a time when South Africans are asking serious questions about how women are treated in our country. The recent incidents of rape, domestic violence and the killing of lesbians have been well documented and discussed at great length on various platforms, including on this very program. Now, on the business front, some strides have been made, but there's still plenty of room for improvement. So taking all of this into account, is our society serious about empowering women? If so, what more needs to be done? These are just some of the questions that we're asking tonight on Interface, and our guests are Mandlakazi Mphahlwa, who is a media personality, a businesswoman and a rape survivor. Bridget Khadebe is an entrepreneur and an economic activist. Chipiwa Ramataga is the Chief Information Officer of the Financial Services Board. And later on the show, we're going to be joined in our Durban studio by Pastor Deborah Bell, who is from the Deo Gloria Family Church, who's also a lesbian, and we'll be chatting to her about that. Now, as always, you can join this discussion by sending us your SMS 33726 or posting your comments on Facebook. Our page is Interface on SABC3, and the debate has been raging on our Facebook page, talking about patriarchy, talking about all sorts of different things. So thank you so much for your comments. We'll read some of them a little bit later on the show. On to the discussion. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
International Women's Day, the 8th of March, that's today. Did anybody really notice? This is Bridget.
Well, I went to my village and I found women still there doing the same thing that normally happens on a day like this. But I thought that I should just dedicate this day by spending time with the women in my village.
Yes.
And of course they noticed. They spoke about the Oscar Pistorius case, they spoke about rape, they spoke about how we could all embrace the assistance of, the liberating women from all this strife and frustration that they find.
Now, on an international stage, there's great PR around International Women's Day events. And you're in PR, Mandlakazi. Do you think that when they say the gender agenda is gaining momentum, that really in a country like ours, we can say that it is?
I think it's one topic that one cannot spin, if one can put it that way. It needs tangible action starting from, for example, my day, I started in church, and men in my church were asked to stand up and take a pledge. And that's where it begins. I would say it begins with our men saying they take us as women, not only as they are equals, but they will not lift their hands, they will not harm us in any way, they will not rape us, because we're their sisters, we're their wives, we're their daughters. That's where it begins.
But does it really make a difference, though? Because if you look at the rhetoric on the political stage, on the business stage, everywhere, everybody says the right things. We need to protect the women, we need to protect the children in our society, and then we see the stats just going up and up, domestic violence, rape, and all of these very bad things.
Thembisa, it does help. We cannot say, let's stop communicating about the scourge. That's what I will call it. Because every 4 minutes in South Africa, a woman is raped. Yeah. Those figures we know. But how many of those women, that's why I'm dressed the way I am, there are those women who don't have a voice, especially those in the rural areas, who do not know where to start when they are raped. So the more we give them the information and empower them to say, when you are raped, this is what you do. This is where you go. And I think even traditional leaders as well can come on board on this debate, because they are first point of call for those women, particularly those in the rural areas.
Chibi, where's the disconnect here? I mean, we are saying the right things, but the numbers are not adding up. You are in the IT space, and you've seen some developments there, but where's the disconnect between what should be done and what's happening on the ground?
I think the disconnect is fear. If you look at, there is a study that the UNDP did in 95, and they are saying women are responsible for 2/3 of the world's work. That amounts to 50% of the world's GDP, but women are still earning like 10% of the world's income.
Yeah.
That already tells a story. So there's somebody who's holding the 90% of the income, but they're not contributing the 90% of the work. Women are already contributing the other 50%. So like any other person who's comfortable, you have fear. And for us to address the fear, we may have to bring men into the dialogue. I think it's high time we say to the men that have found the light to say, can you share? Let them know that a rise of a woman does not mean a fall of another man.
But do you agree then with what Mandlakazi is saying, that it starts with a pledge like that?
It definitely does. And for men to pledge like that, it talks to the younger men.
Yes.
Because you cannot just empower the girl child and leave the boy child behind. And it takes another man to talk in a voice that another man can hear. They cannot hear from us. They must hear from other men.
All right. So, Bridget, I get very frustrated, I must be honest. Every time around August, I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. The events are going to come flooding in. We're going to talk about women, the 16 days of activism, International Women's Day. And then I read the newspapers. I mean, we had on the screen a few moments ago just some of the headlines of what's been happening in recent days in South Africa. And it's not looking good. So, should we be concentrating on the events, or is there something else that we should be doing now?
I think we have to live what we preach, and I think that's where we're lacking. We do recognize the days, we celebrate those women days, and we take cognizance of the fact that the statistics are bad. But when it comes to implementing the day-to-day lifestyle, that's where we're lacking. I think the pledge, beyond the pledge that the men make, and beyond the pledge the society make, it has to start from home. Where when you wake up in the morning, your children are not exposed to a man abusing the mother, because that child tomorrow will also hopefully become a potential abuser to his wife. Yes. Or the woman will embrace abuse because that's the only thing she knows. But if you grow up in a home where things are better, where mother and father respect each other, and everything is fair and there's harmony in the home, that's the kind of home the boy, when he's an adult, or the girl, when she's a wife, will want to create. And from there, and from creating that home, you create a potential society that will think like that. But the laws also have to be implemented, because you find that even when the victims go to ask for help, the police system is not functioning well, or you find that the justice system might not go to the extent that the two sides of the stories are heard equally. So, you know, it has to be a culmination of everything, from the family, from the justice system, from the police department, from the church, from the country as a whole.
Okay, before I take a quick break, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add as well, I think the fathers need to play a more active role within their homes. I'm raising a boy child as well, and whatever information I impart on him, he still needs a male figure that is strong, that is present, in order to guide him in terms of how he should present himself as a man going forward.
All right, the role of men in fighting the scourge of rape and domestic violence. What more can women be doing in the home to make sure that this does not continue? These are some of the questions that we'll be asking right after this break. Thank you so much for your SMSs as they keep trickling in, and also your Facebook messages. We're back after this. And you're back on Interface here on SABC 3. Thanks for staying with us. We're talking about women empowerment. Today is International Women's Day. And we're also joined in our Durban studios by Pastor Deborah Bell, who is a lesbian and is a pastor at the same time from the Deo Gloria Family Church. Let's say good evening to you, Pastor. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
I think let's get the elephant out of the room first. How does a pastor also be a lesbian? How does that work?
Well, it might seem that the question is quite uncommon, but it's not. It's very common, even among gay and lesbian people themselves. And I think really, in essence, what we have to do is we have to stop building stereotypes of what determines who we are, because that is also part and parcel of the problem we have regarding patriarchy in this country, and why we are still dealing with such relevant issues concerning women. The way that the family unit is created, the stereotypes that we build up, all those things are vital. And just so that you don't think I'm bypassing your question regarding being a lesbian and being a pastor, This is really a process, it's a journey of reconciling one's faith with one's sexual orientation and celebrating the diversity of God's creation.
Pastor, the role of religion in what is happening currently in society. There are some that are saying patriarchy as a system is deeply entrenched in the faith community and that it is playing a negative role in the empowerment of women or the lack thereof. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a justified statement, and I think it's a very real one. I think the problem with the church in general, with a capital C, is that we are 20 years behind concerning most world issues. And I think while we can appear to be so progressive regarding our faith, I think a major element is that we build so many things around stereotypes, and that people of faith are so fearful of compromising their faith to adopt or to look at anything else that is different from what they understand, again, things that emanate from tradition and traditional belief, that this is where we start to build up these negative or wrong perceptions, whether it be a gay pastor being acceptable, whether it be women being seen as equal, both in the church and in the family unit. All of these things form part and parcel of where we stand today regarding these issues.
I think the ladies have already said that it's going to have to be an approach that comes from all sides. You spoke about the role of traditional leaders and the pastors talking about the role of the faith community. But Chipi, what about the fact that we've got so many women directors? I mean, the BWA census that came out recently was talking about how women directors hold 1,224 directorships. It's an increase of 650 board seats since 2009. And my question is, so what?
It definitely is a so what, because recently I read a newspaper clip where they were talking about women executives in a light that I really did not like the article at all. And I realized that there is that element where we are seen as the odd one out to some extent, and that results in not having that support that you need. Whether it's the men around you, they will look at you like, okay, so what is she think she's achieving? But then the women around you as well are going, okay, is she coming or what's happening? We need to get to a point where as women, we help each other along the way. We hold each other's hand. But on the other side, I need to tap into men because I believe in men. I was fortunate enough to grow up with a father who is amazing. And along the way, my journey was full of men who held my hand and saw potential. So that tells me there is ability for men to look at you and just see your potential and not see your gender. And those men, there is something about them. There is something they believe. There is something they understand. There is something they have proven. And we need to get that message across. We need to celebrate these men. Okay. As much as I'm looking forward to August, I would like to have August with men standing up, talking about women issues.
But are they taking it seriously, Mandlakas? Are the men taking the celebration of women seriously? Or is it a tick box mentality that, oh gosh, it's August, I need to be seen to be supporting the women agenda?
I would say there are some of them. For example, just to agree with Chipiwa, is that, for example, the opportunities I've been given in my career all my life, I've received them from men. So there are men out there who do believe in our ability as women, and they also believe in what we can offer in terms of whether be it in business or whether be it in society as well. So they are there.
So, Bridget, just getting back to the directorships, I mean, you're one of the pioneers when it comes to the championing of the women's cause in South Africa. When you see that the number of board seats going to women is increasing, what's your sentiment? Do you think, okay, we're getting somewhere, or are you just unfazed?
I think it's an artificial increase. When you look at the amount of men that are in the industry, and when you look at what government has done, especially the ruling party, that seeks to have a 50-50, 50% men, 50% women, even at the ANC Maroon conference. You cannot become a National Executive Committee member beyond 40 women and 40 men to make the 80 people. And, you know, so I think in the business sector, we're lacking behind. And despite the fact that the laws require the participation of women in the industry, at senior positions, that is a bit, you know, not done. But I must admit that I'm in the mining industry, and it's the man that mentored me. My father was my first mentor, also my mother, of course. And then I grew up between two boys, so I've always been very lucky to have men. And when I started in the mining industry 26 years ago, it's the National Union of Mine Workers that gave me my first human resource manager to work in the contract mining company that I own before I went into the ownership of mines. And also, you know, there's still lots of prejudices, not just at the board level, but also underground.
I hear that you're putting emphasis on the role of men, and I like that. But just to get back to what Chipiwo was talking about, women holding other women's hands to go forward, is that really happening? Or are we just getting lots of ladies that are getting fabulously rich and scoring all sorts of points, but are not doing anything for the other women?
I think, you know, we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, because there are lots of women that are trying themselves to get there.
Okay.
And then the little that's left, they might not have enough time to even bring effectively everybody together. But of course, yes, there is merit in what she's saying. You know, you do find here and there women do not support each other. I personally have a serious problem with embracing a lot of women participants in my company, because they can't work late. Many of them can't work late. They have to go home. They have got to go and cook. And you find that if you're an entrepreneur, you can't just look at 5 o'clock and go home. You have to go late. So you find that, you know, even when you try to make it an embracing environment, their husbands don't allow them to do those things. So it's you know, especially when they're African women from African descent, women of color, the men want the wife to go back home and cook. And even though she tries to have her cake and eat it, to be a professional person and a housewife at the same time, she finds it very difficult. Yeah, she finds it difficult. So we need to ensure that we marry the kind of men that are going to allow us to be who we are.
Are they available?
There's the cultural expectations, you know, where you still expected, you might be in a boardroom the one day, but come the Saturday, you actually staring at three-legged pots, you know, at your in-laws. So we wear these many hats.
Okay, we've got to take a break, and I want us to bring Pastor Deborah in after the break, just looking at the role of men, and particularly in the faith environment. But we're back after this. Remember that we are taking your SMSs 33726 right after this. Welcome back to Interface here on SABC 3. Let's just take a quick look at some of your Facebook messages. Smusi Songosi says, parents, socialize your kids the correct way. That's how we're going to move forward. And Sharon Manyika says, I think looking at the root cause of the problem, it's important for us to note that black men seem to be affected by violence and ill treatment from history and a typical single parenting scenario in South Africa, where the majority grow up without a father figure. And Lipalo Thomas says, things have changed. Men have become haunters instead of hunters. And this should be put to an end by tightening the law. All right, that's just, you know, we don't have a lot of time to go through so many of the messages that you've sent through, but thank you so much for them. And the debate and the discussion is raging in the studio as well. The role of women and whether or not we are our worst enemies. I'm not sure which of you ladies would like to take that one and be bold enough to say to the women that are watching, check yourselves.
Well, I think I've been complaining to Mandlagazi the other day in the office, and I said, you know, I find difficulty having women that are hungry enough to tackle the role of entrepreneurship or just to tackle the role of leadership. They are there, but they're few.
Okay.
Because you find that, it comes with our culturalization. When a child is a beautiful girl or whatever, even if she's not beautiful, the mother tells the child, one day you're going to marry a man who's very rich and he'll look after you. So we have to start reinforcing a different communication with our girls and say to them, one day you're going to be a superwoman in a workplace, while you can still have a husband, while you can cook for him after hours, while you can be a homemaker, while you can play the traditional role and have your cake and eat it.
Pastor Deborah, let's bring you in here. The role of culture and the role of religion that you alluded to earlier. How do we get around that? How do we get around some of the cultural impediments, so to speak, that we have as women to our own progress?
Well, I think that it's really important that we understand that patriarchy is something that we have to deal with. And I was listening to the guests in the studio a little earlier, and the one thing I want to comment on, if I can, is to say that there is a perpetual cycle that we are seeing here. And that is that it is both the mother's and the father's role. And if there is no father, then it is the mother's role. And if it is a lesbian parents, then it is both their role. If it is gay men, it is their role. To bring up their child in the way they should go. That is what the Word of God teaches us. And what that means is that we are all seen as equal in the eyes of God. When Jesus spoke to the woman at the well, in John chapter 4, he spoke to her. Their dialogue was absolute equality. His disciples even pulled him aside and said, how can you speak to her like this? And she was a Samaritan woman, a woman of color. And so these things are really, really important, that we begin to understand that patriarchy is something that we have to deal with because it perpetuates violence against women, and we have to bring our sons up in a way not only of equal opportunity as we do our girls, but also equal responsibility. That is the role of parents.
Patriarchy is a monster that we live with on a daily basis. It's there. It's not something that you're going to tackle overnight and say, oh, well, we're now living in a different regime. So what do we do within the system? How do we work within the system to make it work for us as women?
Well, I think some of the ways we can do it is to bring the kind of awareness that we are doing already, sadly, that we have to have such things as Women's Days. If you look, for example, even at the strategy of 1 Billion Rising, V-Day, it was absolutely a poor show from the male side. Although we saw many more males participating, it was a poor show. Many men thought this was ridiculous. And why should we even have some separate Women's Day? And I think the whole role of this is so that we create awareness, that these are still real issues. The other way we could look at is, of course, to start with the family unit, which also involves the church on a large scale. It's what we teach in the church that makes a huge impact and has a huge influence on our family values. And if we look at our traditions and what we believe, we will often take out of the Word of God, as it is called, or the Bible or the Scriptures, and we will say, this is what the Word of God says. And because the Bible, as much as I believe it is the inspired written Word of God, it was also written by patriarchal men of its day, although inspired by the Spirit. It was written in a language that was understandable to those in that day, which was a patriarchal society.
Bring you in to talk about that very topic at a different time, because that's a topic all on its own. But just to wrap up, ladies, you know, going forward, what is the role of the men? And secondly, the role of these events? And how do we try and make sure that the empowerment of women is actualized? Shipio.
I think that the role of men is other men teaching their fellow men that we're not going to be beaten out of this one. Because I need to listen on what Bridget was saying. It's clear that we are sending the wrong message. We are prisoners based on what message we're giving to these men. Where you go home, the men want to help you take the child, a sick child, to the doctor. You know you've got a busy day, but you'll say, what will my mother-in-law say? So it's high time we say the right thing. I've got a hectic day tomorrow, honey. How does your diary look? And it's okay for him to take responsibility. So the role in the household will need to change.
But are the men open to that, by and large?
To be honest with you, in my house, my husband has the speed dial to the pediatrician. So it does work in some households. But I would like to add on to that and say we don't see men as enemies. We love men. We need them to stand by us and actually hold our hands and let's go forward together.
Yes.
We're not here to fight men, but we're here to say, hear us, listen to us, give us an opportunity as well. And to women as well. Women can be their worst enemies sometimes. We're also very hard on ourselves. I think we need to be kinder to ourselves and be kinder to each other and give each other those opportunities where they're there and not necessarily see each other as competitors. We are competitive beings by nature as women, but I really think we take it too far sometimes.
All right. Mrs. Bridget?
I think patriarchy is entrenched in our society. I mean, to date, I'm still called Patrice Motsepe's sister, Cyril Ramaphosa's sister-in-law, Jeff Radebe's wife. Who am I?
You're somebody something.
I'm Bridget Radebe, an economic activist, and a social entrepreneur, you know, a business entrepreneur, and those things, you're not branded like that. And we're also appealing to the media to also look at women in who they are, but not divorcing themselves from who they are associated or married with or you know, related to. That's also, it could be important, but those kind of interpretations also destroy your image as an individual. And it happens all over. When I read about Maria Ramos or whether it's Wendy Applebaum, they tell you Donnie Gordon's daughter, or, you know, Trevor Manuel's this and that. You know, somewhere along the line, let us all embrace this, you know, the success of women.
All right, as we are. Thank you so much, ladies. We've run out of time, and I hope that everybody watching, male or female, takes this on and moves on with an understanding that nobody's fighting anybody here. The days of the bra-burning feminists are gone. We need our bras. We're not going to be burning any bras, and we want to work together with the men. Thank you also to Pastor Deborah in our Durban studios, and thank you for just such a lively discussion on Facebook and for your SMSs coming through. We're back next week at the same time. For now, good night.